Greetings everyone! In today's video I'm going to build a replacement cover for my turntable. Well, here's my setup. Kind of set up on its own, separate from my main system. I just don't have room for a turntable over there right now. But I'll work on that in the future. A dwindling collection of vinyl here. Weeding out vinyl I don't want or is in bad shape. I do like Gary Puckett and the Union Gap, it's just that record is in poor condition. So yeah, it's got to go. But anyway, the dual 1237 I think it is. And this cover here unfortunately has a nasty crack in the back. I tried to put glue on it. It made a white stain. I was hoping the glue would wick into the crack there, but it didn't work out too well. So I want to replace the cover. It's kind of a tall cover. This table can be configured as a changer, and I'm not going to use that. So I can make the cover smaller. I want to make it a clear cover. Yeah, I don't really like the bronze tinted 70s look. Some people might. You know, the avocado appliances and the bronze tinted covers on everything. But anyhow, I'm going to replace that, and I think it would look a lot better. So the material I'm going to build the cover out of is acrylic. It's a very DIY friendly material that you can cut, drill, route, machine, glue, whatever, to make, you know, boxes and things. And here's a sample piece of it. I cut this and polished the edges. You can see it's really lovely, clear. It'll look really nice. I'm not going to use this thickness because of the weight, but it'll still look pretty nice. Acrylic is sold under trade names such as plexiglass and lucite and a handful of others. Now here's what I'm up against. This isn't just a plain box. You can see the sides are not straight up and down. They kind of flare out. And the design of that turntable, it has this little indentation here. So as it opens, it clears the top. And you got this on the back. This shape I'll have to route in to clear the side of the table. And this back side is thicker. It's thicker than 1/8 inch acrylic, but this 3/16, it's thinner than that, and this won't fit into the hinges. So I think I'll just use 1/8 inch, and that should allow a little play. So it should work with this outward tapered side. And like I say, I'm going to have to route these in for it to work. And of course I got to find the height of it because it's not going to be as tall. So yeah, there are some challenges. I don't know how it's going to work out in the end. I'm just going to wing it and see what happens here. Trying to get some precise measurements here. Always measure near the edge. So if I measured this thing in the middle, you can see, because the sides have some flex to it, and they could be naturally bowed a bit. See how it moves when I push on it? So if you measure it near the corner, you're going to get an accurate, more accurate measurement. And these come out at 16 3/8 if I get directly over it. So you get parallax error if you look at it at an angle. So yeah, I measured it in 2 places in the back here. I'm getting 16 3/8. Also need to find the new height. This thing is 4 1/4 tall overall. And I measured with the tone arm in the raise position, which is the highest point. And adding a little bit of extra room, I can make the thing 2 3/4 tall. And then, of course, the back, which is a bit taller, I'm going to have to measure that and add that on. Another thing, when you're cutting the material, you have to account for the thickness. So I usually cut the lengths to their actual thickness. Usually a little bit more because I'm going to machine the edge down a bit. But when I glue the sides on, I have to subtract, account for the thickness of the material. I have to subtract that off. That way, I'm getting American units here. 13 7/8, so I'm going to have to subtract the thickness of the acrylic, which is 1/8. And that's another thing. Kind of like the lumber trade, where a 2x4 isn't really a 2x4, it's 3.5 by 1.5. Well, acrylic is the same way. This is 1/8 inch, and well, it's not really an 1/8 inch. It's slightly less. They always try to get you one way or another, it seems. So I have to account for that thickness on the two sides when I cut this to fit it together. Otherwise, it's going to come out too long. And last but not least, I'll have to deal with the routing here to get this right. Have to be pretty accurate here for this to work properly. Okay, I have my sides cut here. So how do you cut acrylic? Well, several ways really. You can use a table saw. You can get special expensive blades for plastic, but if you use one of those carbide blades with 80 teeth, those seem to do pretty well. You have to remember that's not going to be your finished edge. So what I like to do is oversize the material a little bit because I'm going to finish the edge. I'm going to route it down or run it through the joiner and finish the edge. Another, if you're only doing one or a small project, you want to invest too much, you can just use a ruler, something with no slip cork, no slip backing, and a scoring tool. You can buy the cheap ones at the hardware store. This is a nicer one. I use a machine, a scoring machine. Again, I oversize it because I'm going to finish the edges. And that's a pretty inexpensive way of doing it. There are videos on about how to score it. And, I'm assuming nobody has a CNC shop. We're just small-time DIY here. But if you have a router, which in the later part of this video, you really do need a router. But if you have a router table, you can use one of these bits and cut it right at the exact dimension because it leaves a nice edge already, so you don't have to worry about the extra there. This is a pretty expensive bit though. This is like a $50 bit, and it leaves a nice edge. But with a hand router, you have to offset the from the blade to the edge of the router because you'll use a straight edge to run the router down it. And again, if you have a table, you just set the stop to wherever you need it, so on and so forth. I assume everybody knows how to use their equipment to cut material. It's always good to practice as well. I edge my material with a joiner, and it leaves a very nice edge, as you can see here. This will polish up really nice. You can see it's a nice, nearly flawless edge. And like I say, it'll polish up really nice. So this is meant for wood. So if you run it on wood, you want to sharpen the blades for acrylic, because if they're worn down too much, it won't work too well. But just set this to take this little sliver off. So you run it through a few times, and you end up like 30 seconds off each side, so that's a total of 1/16. That's why I was using that number. Another method is to use a router. In this bit here, just a hand router, and you'll notice there's a little bearing on the end. Well, this can run down a straight edge, like a thicker piece of acrylic, and you tape the two pieces together, your workpiece and your jig, as I call it, I use jig tape. This is really just fiberglass carpet tape. You can buy a roll for $5 at like Menards or maybe Home Depot. So if for example, if one of these pieces were my straight edge and the other piece my workpiece, the workpiece will be slightly longer. It'll stick out a bit, and you tape them together. Then you put the bit in your router, and it just runs through, and the bearing follows your jig piece, as I call it, or your straight edge, and the blades cut down the workpiece. The workpiece is on top, of course, because that's where the blade is, and this rides along the straight edge. Okay, that last description might be hard to follow just from me describing it, so here I kind of set it up. So that bottom piece there is the straight edge. The top is my workpiece. Again, it's been overcut, and I'm going to route it down using the straight edge with the router. You can see here how that bearing there will ride on the straight edge, and the blade will cut down the workpiece to match that edge. And as long as that's a nice smooth straight edge, you'll get a nice clean looking, edge there that you can polish when you're done. And you don't even have to polish it. It looks pretty nice as it is. Okay, the hard part of the project is getting these shapes in. So I took a piece of 1/4 inch thick acrylic, which is going to be my jig. I held it up there and try to get that profile from the inside. I got a couple thick lines there, so I know the outermost edge is the one I want to cut on. And I also got the profile for this side on this part of the acrylic. So you can use a coping saw, or if you have a jigsaw, you can use that as well. Kind of get a rough cut out there and clean it up with a file or sandpaper or something. And I'm even going to have to get that angle. See, that part's angled there. I'm going to have to file that into the finished piece. So yeah, a little bit of work, but we'll get it. Okay, let's see how I did here. I jigsawed this piece of 1/4 inch acrylic to use as a jig. So let's see how I did there. Okay, this looks pretty good. You don't have to put that angle in there. I just went all the way down with it. Of course, the router bit is going to round that off, so you're going to have to file that square, or I'm going to have to. And this side here, and it's hard to do this with the camera. A little bit off there. I'm going to have to take some material off this side. This side, yeah, it's a little bit much, but it's not going to matter. This side, when you open the lid, it's flush with the top edge of the table, so this has to be even. Okay, tape the jig to my workpieces here, and I had to allow for the thickness of the back, so that's why it's overhanging there. And you know something, you don't really need a jig to do this. I could have just taped the two pieces together and directly jigsawed it right on there. But this way, if I screwed up, I won't screw up my workpiece. I'll get the jig right first and then do it. But yeah, usually you make a jig if you're going to do multiple pieces. Okay, I routed those down. Still going to have to file them a bit, it looks like, to make it fit. And I did the back piece here, both sides. You can see the router bit cannot make an inside corner square, so I have to file that down. It's a good idea to leave corners rounded, inside corners rounded, because it acts as a stress riser for a crack to form if it's not so squared off. But in this case, I think I don't have a choice, or it will interfere with the edge of the turntable. Okay, I'm just checking the fit here, so I stuck the piece into the back of the turntable. Look at that fit. That is absolutely spot on. Maybe a little too tight. I might file that down just a bit. Let's see, when it closes, it'll be like that, and it tilts down. And you got all that shape here. That's why I had to make all those routings into the pieces because of the weird design of this thing. But yeah, it works as it is. I still might file it a bit. Gluing acrylic. This will be short and sweet. You can probably find another channel that explores gluing acrylic a little more in detail. But I'm using a solvent cement that's meant for gluing acrylic. It actually dissolves the two pieces and welds them together. So I need a 90-degree angle to do that. I have a jig, and it has a groove cut into it. So the actual joint does not touch the area. I should say the jig doesn't touch the area of the joint, or the glue could wick up behind the material and spoil it. It's a nice clean surface. So yeah, I have to make sure these two joints are perfectly aligned. I just use a little spacer block for that. Make sure these are tight together and these two pieces are square. No gaps there. I want the glue to use capillary action to wick into that joint. And let's see if I can do this. Oh, doing it through a viewfinder. And it is a little too tight, even didn't go all the way in, but that's okay. When it solidifies, I can glue it from the other side and finish it that way. So yeah, this is the back piece and the side piece where I had to route those cutouts on it. We're almost there. 99 degrees. We might hit 100 today. It's 3:30 in the afternoon, so yeah, we might tick up to 100 today. Good day to stay inside and work on projects. Okay, it is time to glue the top on. I got all four sides glued up in the jig. So what I like to do is oversize the top piece a little bit. You can see there's a little lip that sticks out all around. The reason I do that is because no matter what you do, acrylic is always going to have a slight bow in it. You're never going to get that perfect if you try. You might get lucky, but it usually never works out. So it's easier to oversize it, glue the top on, and then route it down even. Okay, so now I set the sides on the top. I put some weights on it, and I'm going to apply the glue. I also use my 90-degree angle here to make sure everything's square. Here's the tip for gluing. I see people using shims and wedges. It takes 10 times longer. This is a method I came up with a long time ago. What I do is start out on a flat table. The table's got to be flat so you don't have any gaps. Then put a towel down. Then you put the weights on. Make sure everything's squared up. I take a feeler gauge. I'm just using Mylar. It's like 4/1000ths of an inch thick, 4 mil. And I just go around the edge here, making sure that there's no gaps. You want it nice and tight. Go around the whole thing. And if there's no gaps, you can glue it. If there's gaps, you can kind of wedge something underneath to push it tighter. But usually, if your table's flat and you have the towel, it's going to be flat all around. The towel helps push it up against it. And also, when you glue it, I run my fingernail. Make sure you use your fingernail, not your fingertip, because you might cut it on the sharp edge. But I run it ahead as I'm gluing it down. And that opens the gap up just a little bit and allows the glue to flow in there. I can't do it holding the camera, but And I just take that glue bottle, and I won't do it here, but just run my fingertip ahead of this while it's gluing, putting the glue into the joint, and it'll make a nice bubble-free joint for you. Okay, I glued it all up. If you do it right, you won't see any bubbles or anything. So what I need to do now is let it set for at least a half hour, probably longer, and then I'll route it. If you route it too soon, you might kind of get gummy stuff from the edge, but it needs to solidify a little more. So I'd give it at least an hour. Okay, the cement has plenty of time to set. It's like 4 hours now. I went away and came back. So that had plenty of time. So I take the Roto-Rooter here with the flush trim bit, and you just buzz around the outside, and that'll trim off that little edge there. Okay, routing is complete. So now I want to do the last thing here. Well, last couple things. After routing, the edges are going to be sharp. So I use the scraper tool and just kind of scrape along the edge to get rid of that sharpness. Then polish. All I use is these polyester towels. Just run it on the faucet, get it damp. And Novus 2. I just polish those edges with Novus 2. I mean, they're not bad as they are, but I think it'd be nicer if they were polished. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and come back with the results. Oh, I should mention, I would never flame polish. I know it's a quick, easy way to polish acrylic, but what happens is it heats up the edge, and as it cools back down, it leaves stress in the material and it can cause crazing. Say if somebody in the future was cleaning this thing with a certain chemical, it could initiate crazing. Crazing is tiny little cracks, and it ruins it. It makes it look ugly. So yeah, I would never flame polish. To me, it's terrible. I know people do it, but I would never do it. Okay, all polished and cleaned up. Look how lovely those glue joints are, no bubbles. Kind of still got a little bit of dust, but well, will it work? Man, that is nice. Will it fit? Oh boy, let's do it. Whoa, just like I bought one. That is awesome. That looks so much nicer. Wow, I'm impressed with myself. But there is one problem. It doesn't want to stay open. I know acrylic is more dense than polystyrene. See if I can adjust those hinges. You can see why I had to have that cut out there, because when you open it, it would interfere. Yeah, that is nice. Another thing about acrylic, if you listen to it when you tap it, now listen to the other one. Here's another one. Kind of hear that metallic ring? Well, acrylic isn't resonant like polystyrene is. And they say that if you play records with the cover down, it can transmit some of the sound to the turntable. Well, I don't know about that, but at least it's non-resonant. And it's not going to scratch as easy as polystyrene. I mean, you barely touch polystyrene. Just run your fingernails over it, and it scratches it. And this is not going to scratch as easy, because acrylic is a little bit more durable in that regard. Figured it out. I started playing with these little dials here. There's one over here, one over here. And it's a spring tensioner. So now it's like soft touch. Stays open. Awesome. Now we're golden. I was going to call it a partial success, but now we have success. Awesome.